Today in Luther's Kitchen, I'm making fresh pasta, which making the pasta is not the hard part, rolling it out is. I'm using two different kinds of flour, all-purpose flour and semolina flour that I am just sifting onto a clean counter because that's going to be my work surface. I'm making a traditional mound and then I'm pressing in to make a well so that I have some place to put eggs. I'm going to drop in 4 large eggs. And then using a fork, I'm going to begin to whisk the eggs into the flour, pulling in the flour as I'm doing it, little by little, making sure that I'm not breaching the flour wall because I don't want the eggs to run all over the counter. Once your mixture is not going to run away from you, you can grab some other implement. I like to start with a bench scraper. And I'm just kind of cutting that mixture in with the bench scraper before ditching that and using my hands. Once I get my hands in there, I'm going to start the kneading process. If the dough feels a little dry and you've got dry bits that keep falling off the sides, you may need to add a little water. Now, I don't add water directly to the dough. I just wet my hands with a little warm water and then I use my wet hands to continue to knead the dough. I knead for about 6-7 minutes, then I stop, give it about a 10-minute rest because I need the rest. I'm usually sweating while I'm doing this. And then I give it another 4 to 5 minutes until the dough is super smooth. I mean, super, super smooth. And you'll feel it and you can also tell. And again, if your dough is dry and crumbly, just wet your hands, shake it off, shake off the excess water, and just get in there with your moistened hands to continue to knead the dough until you get just this really nice, super soft, flat surface. Once you have achieved that, plastic wrap it. It goes into the refrigerator for about 30 minutes. While the dough is resting, you can work on a sauce if you are going to make a sauce for your fresh pasta. Now that my dough's rested, I'm cutting it into 6ths and I'm gonna cover the other 5 pieces with plastic wrap so they don't dry out. I'm using my hands to sort of flatten the dough into a bit of a rectangle before I roll it out with a rolling pin. And this is the hardest part about making the fresh pasta because you need the dough to be super thin. So thin that you can see your hand through it, or you could actually read some kind of text through it. Like, that's really thin. So when I'm close to getting it to the thickness that I'm looking for, I give it a little bit of flour so that it's not sticking to the counter. And then I fold it in thirds and I'm just kind of evening out the sides so that I get some very straight looking noodles. And then using that bench scraper, or you could use a knife, I'm just cutting what would be considered like fettuccine size noodles. On a baking sheet pan that's lined with parchment paper, I'm just placing piles of the noodles so that they can dry a bit. I can leave them here while I'm finishing rolling out everything else, or I can actually slide that into the freezer and I can freeze them into these little nests and then pop them off when they're frozen and put them in a container or bag, and then I can boil them later. It is so much easier. It is so much easier to roll this out using a pasta machine. So I have an attachment for the KitchenAid and I'm starting at the thickest end of the attachment, which is 0, and then I'm moving to 8. And every time I put the dough in, obviously it's getting thinner, so it's getting longer. I end up having to cut it in half before running it through the fettuccine cutter. But this really made beautiful noodles, just the right thickness. I just boiled them. As soon as they float to the top, they're done. Put a little bit of olive oil, a little garlic, some fresh Parmesan cheese, some parsley, salt and pepper, and you have an amazing, simple but delicious meal. For this recipe and more, visit myclasscancook.com.